Hey, one of the things that we were going to talk about on today's podcast were the U.S. tariffs, mostly against Canada, but how is it affecting? There you go, elbows up, attaboy.
Well,
But how's it affecting the industry? What do you see happening in your in? And I appreciate that you're not in restaurant operations right now, but you're out there as a restaurant consumer. I know you've been in Edmonton lately. You see a lot. What are you seeing as far as the tariffs go? How is it affecting the market? What are you seeing?
well, I mean, I, the biggest thing would be the lack of U.S. products, specifically beer, liquor, wine, that the provincial government agencies aren't bringing in, and that restaurants are no longer able to stock. I mean, as you know, I enjoy the occasional bourbon. And that said, I'm happy to say forget that and pivot to good old Crown Royal or something Canadian. But yeah, on when I'm out and about, yeah, there's a lack of U.S. content on the menus. And I think some of that is just because of what the way the market is now, and I think some of that is some restaurants making a decision because the market is telling them, hey, we're not interested in that product right now, right? And it's a bit of a silent protest, and and it's something that people can do. So certainly seeing that, and whether it's people changing their recipes of their old fashions and pulling bourbon from them, or even I heard a story of a coffee shop changing the name of the Americano to the Canadiano. You know, those sort of things, and I think those are just happening sort of organically in the market, right?
Well, I know that some restaurants their first instinct was when the liquor stores pulled all the American products from the shelves were to overbuy. So lots of bourbon, in particular bourbon, but even Bacardi in the glass bottle is coming up from the States. Apparently, the plastic bottle still is made in Ontario, so you can get the plastic bottle here. I don't know why that's different. Um, and that or they're only now are they pivoting toward other brands. And this is the thing that I've been coaching about is like, man, you have to be more nimble than that. And I appreciate what's on there, but can't you do a Canadian old fashioned and find a sweet rye or something maybe that is double oaked or something that's going to give you still that old fashioned feel and taste, but get you where you want to go, but using a Canadian product. It's easy to drop. We're lucky. BC makes fantastic wines, but you're not going to be able to get you know Kendall Jackson or some of these things anymore that are typical American off the shelf. My understanding is you can still buy it by the case from the warehouse until it's gone. They're not gonna replenish. But like if you wanted Bullet, you could buy a whole case of it, but they're not gonna crack a case. You used to be able to order a whole bottle or three bottles. No, you got to order a whole case now.
Well, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with restaurants, sort of having to, short notice stock up on the American brands because, I like the don't let a good crisis go to waste, right? Sort of mentality. And I think this is a good opportunity for restaurants to pivot a little bit, right? And then, and, you know, gin up, to pardon the pun, your Canadian content on your menu, right? And especially as we're heading into spring and summer, and local producers are gearing stuff up. Like, yeah, take that opportunity and that mentality in the market of the buy Canadian and embrace that, right? And yeah, and have more local distillers, local microbrews, and then if you can get local produce, whether it's greenhouse grown or not, right? And use that opportunity to tweak your menu, right? And then use that as a bit of a marketing tool as well, right? I think there's opportunity in crisis, right? And I think and the other benefit is, yeah, it may cost you more, but then you're able to sort of readjust your pricing. And again, the market is telling us that people are going to be happy to spend more if they know it's a Canadian product. So let's, yeah, do that, right?
Well, I think too, I do have some customers that are stocking up on those American brands, but they're just not being ordered either. Like you're buying them because it's a core product, and you're but I think it's slowing down. Yeah, it's still available, which is great if somebody wants one, but it's those other things. But however, now that we're seeing other brands replace those, even in Canada, I'm starting to see prices go up. Casamigos tequila, went up $2 a bottle this week, and we talk about pivoting and we talk about being flexible. That $2 a bottle, yeah, it's 7.5 cents an ounce, but you're eating that, right? And if you're on a Friday or Saturday night, you're doing just 3 or 4 bottles, yeah, that's 20 or 30 bucks now that you're out. And now that I'm seeing fewer and fewer printed menus, a lot of people, you still act post COVID where menus were faux pas, but a lot of places are still doing that. Well, there's an advantage there. Now you be able to pivot. Before, it costs you, that money was wasted because you're going to spend more money reprinting the menus than you are benefiting from, changing everything up.
Yeah.
Putting 25
Yeah.
cents on, because
Yeah, and I think too. I mean, with that, with its price increases or the market demanding it, right? You that's giving you an opportunity to maybe kind of drop that and pivot to something else where you might make better margins on it if it's local or not, right? So again, there's opportunity there, and you don't have to absorb these costs, right? I think that's a choice.
well, like 7 cents in costs, because us particular liquor we're doing 5 times, so that's 35 cents. So really, like you should be bumping your bourbon price up 35 cents. And it's like, well, hold on, that's a lot. She said, yeah, that's a lot. Now, you can either eat the 7 cents, but you're also eating the profitability. You are trying to get a 20% liquor cost, and now you're not gonna do that.
Yeah, you're foregoing that potential revenue, right?
Well, that's it. And you need the growth, and I think that people have to be really firm to their cost structure and say, hey, yeah, now we're not in a position to reprint the menus every 3 weeks, but at some point we're gonna have to say, hey, I can only absorb so much. And for those that are digital, change it. Like, put 35 some more cents on your Casamigos. Done. Like, let's rock and roll. It shouldn't be that. It really shouldn't be that hard. Much better than it used to be. Or you're going to have some features or something on there that you can talk about at the table. Um, I was at Uli's in White Rock. Now I don't often name drop restaurants, but these guys did such a great job. And the waiter there, he was so great about saying, "Hey, we got a new bar manager, and so here's a little sample of her new cocktail list. We're just getting started with it, but these are all terrific." And like he was really like nobody I've ever seen before about introducing the new cocktail list. He could have just said, "Hey, by the way, here's some cocktail features," and or said nothing at all. But he made a point of saying all Canadian products. This is where what we're trying to achieve with this cocktail menu. Just really well, just job well done. And I think that not only can you pivot, but then you can, like pays to advertise, baby. Like, so push it, and then make sure that the staff understand what the pivot is all about and be prepared to explain that at the table, and not only prepared, like be willing and then want to talk about it at the table. This is why we're doing it, and this is what's happened to the market, and this is what's happening with lettuce or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes to the unintended and then possible long-term benefits that this kind of forced pivot uh, could see in the market, right? Supporting the local economy and then improving sustainability. But yeah, then just exposing your team and your customers to new local products. Yeah, and then forcing you to innovate. I don't, I think that frankly, that's all good things. Not that we want to thank the guy responsible for it, but I don't necessarily think it, especially for hospitality industry, being forced to pivot sometimes is good.
Well, and for the small unit independent operators, this is an advantage because you don't have to deal with corporate. Like, you don't have to wait for somebody, to book a boardroom to discuss it. You can be looking at this, and you and your chef or you and your bar manager, and say, okay, these are the decisions. Let's go. Let's roll it out. Like, like we can have this stuff turned out in an afternoon. Um, It's not like for this for the those in the steak business, wow, like beef is really going to be a problem because so much of our beef comes up from the States. But you know what? Like, okay, maybe you got to be start. Okay, here's some more salmon. Here's some more chicken. Let's like because they're just going to be easier to do.
Yeah, and hey, you know what? I'm in Alberta all the time. Alberta beef, world class as well, right? So, bring,
And so,
again.
but that's what I'm saying. So if you have to pivot to be able to, even if that product was more expensive, like the good Alberta Angus versus going to Sterling out of the States or whatever,
Mhm.
then make those. Like, but have a decision. Um, I looked at the a burger the other day, and it looked terrific. It wasn't really a smash burger, but it really wasn't quarter pound big.
Mhm.
It was decent size, and it had more of everything else. And it was still a $26 burger, but it wasn't like they've been able to save money on the meat by not doing a quarter pound and going a little bit smaller, but then using more of everything else.
Yeah,
And I just thought that was, that was a good looking burger. It was the right size. Um, and obviously somebody's done some math there and
yeah,
said, look, it's easier to add a little bit more tomato or even a slice of bacon than it is to move up the burger, like this burger size. It makes
yeah.
more
Well,
sense.
so I think the other side of the coin is, you'll get some operators saying, well, I'm going to lose my brand identity or I'm going to lose consistency making these kind of pivots or substitutions. But I think it's on how you deliver it, right? If you have to change your burger because the beef you were sourcing is more expensive, or you can't, the produce you were bringing in, you can't bring in, or it's more expensive, or whatever it may be, or you have to change one of your signature cocktails because
Well, I'm,
that's
I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden you change from a chicken place to a taco bar. That mean, what I mean, I'm not suggesting that, but to be able to go through and say, hey, look, you know what, we're modifying or dropping two or three menu items and keeping some of these on. You and I have seen that many times when we're running the dining rooms. That you take the Thai seafood stir fry off. This restaurant's just going to close. Like, give me a break. It's one menu item, and come up with a great one. Don't replace it with junk. Come up with a great one, or modify this. And sometimes, okay, we're going to take when scallops went crazy and we couldn't really do a good scallop dish. Then you got to make it an appetizer. The same thing with rack of lamb. Now, to put 4-bone rack of lamb on the menu, it's crazy expensive. So what are we seeing? We're seeing more of that kind of thing. Make the appetizers. That way, it's still there, but I don't have room for it in the entrees anymore because I can't have a menu price of $60 for an entree.
yeah. So that's we've talked a lot about sort of operational, and what restaurants can do. Something that's out of their control is the marketplace, right? And then when the impact tariffs are having on consumers and consumer spending, right? And if when people get nervous and the economy is slowing down, or the perception is of the economy slowing down, one of the things to cut back on is that discretionary spending, which top of that list is restaurants and dining out, right? So how are restaurants pivoting? How do you think they should pivot, right? I mean, is it, do you do more happy hour? Do you do more takeout? What do you do to still get that, capture that discretionary spend?
Well, we know that the restaurants did a fantastic job surviving COVID because of the all around the word pivot, right? Make a change, make it stick, and do a great job. And I think those restaurants that continue to do a great job will continue to survive. It's with those guys that were on the bubble or on the margin that say, you know what, it's not worth going there. Like it's not worth the money. And those are the first like that's the low hanging fruit that's going to get clipped. But I think that continuing to be smart and by looking at what you're able to offer and really trying to be aggressive about the pivot, even if this means you gotta make a couple of menu changes a month, then you know maybe that's what needs to happen. If and again, the rules and tariffs out of the states seem to be changing week to week, so we never really know. But the reaction, it's the you're right in the sense that the market reflects, it gets scared and they just hold up. But I think that the advantage to the smaller guys and to the independents is the ability to make a change quickly and make it go, especially for those that are doing digital menus.
Oh, for sure. And I'd say too, just as if we see consumer spending sort of contracting and hopefully not into a recession or anything like that, but that is all the more reason for restaurants to watch those nickels and dimes and capture, everything you can. And you can't afford shrinkage at your bar. You can't afford shrinkage in the kitchen, and just to be monitoring that inventory and making sure you're wringing every dollar out of it you're supposed to, right? When the revenue coming in is not going to the right direction, then you need to make sure you're capturing every cent. So I guess my advice as we wrap this one up to restaurateurs is don't be afraid to pivot, right? Whether it's your menu, your cocktail list, or what have you, and move to Canadian content, that sort of thing as well. But then also when you do that, make sure you're capturing every dollar of revenue you're supposed to be getting, right? Because that's what could get you by when
Well,
they
I completely agree. And one as we're wrapping this up, I want to be clear that I really want everyone to go out and visit the small market or the small operator and your local taco bar, your local meat shop, whatever. But and they say, well, that chain over there, that's an American chain. But understand, there's a lot of Canadian and local men, women, and kids that are working there. So just go out, continue to go. I don't think that we should be looking at, getting out of some of those chain restaurants wholly and completely because they employ a lot of good people that are living locally. So I think that there's some advantages to the small operators, but I want it to be said that some of these larger chains, even McDonald's, they employ a lot of good people. There's a lot of paychecks coming out of there.